The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Independence, Missouri. When Elijah Cole first laid eyes on Judge Whitmore's mansion, it stood like a monument to Eastern prosperity amid the frontier town's weathered storefronts and saloons. Its white columns and manicured gardens a stark contrast to the rough-hewn world beyond its iron gates. Elijah adjusted his worn cavalry hat and checked the letter in his vest pocket one more time. The judge's message had been brief. Need experienced guide. Escort duty to Colorado territory. Generous compensation. After 3 months of scraping by on odd jobs and poker winnings, Elijah couldn't afford to be particular about the work he took. A Negro servant in pressed livery answered the door, eyeing Elijah's trail-worn appearance with poorly concealed disdain. "Judge Whitmore's expecting you, sir. This way." The interior was all polished mahogany and crystal chandeliers. A world away from the boarding houses and army camps Elijah had called home for the past decade. His spurs clinked against marble floors as he followed the servant to a study lined with leather-bound books. Judge Whitmore sat behind an imposing desk, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the bearing of a man accustomed to having his orders followed without question. He didn't rise when Elijah entered, merely gestured to a chair. "Mr. Cole, your reputation precedes you." The judge's voice carried the cultured tones of old Virginia. "Decorated cavalry officer, expert tracker, survived more Indian skirmishes than most men see in 2 lifetimes. That was a long time ago, Judge." Elijah remained standing, hat in hand. "These days, I'm just a man looking for honest work." Indeed. Whitmore studied him with the calculating gaze of someone weighing a horse for purchase. "I require someone to escort my daughter to Denver City. She's to be married to Harrison Blackwood of the Colorado Mining Corporation. The journey should take no more than 6 weeks if the weather holds. Straightforward enough. When do we leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn. You'll be paid $200 upon safe delivery, plus expenses." The judge opened a drawer and produced a leather pouch, tossing it onto the desk. "Consider this an advance on your fee." Elijah hefted the pouch, feeling the weight of gold coins. It was more money than he'd seen in months. "Seems generous for a simple escort job." "Nothing about my daughter is simple, Mr. Cole." A flicker of something, frustration, worry, crossed the judge's face. "Josephine is spirited. She's been raised with certain Eastern sensibilities that don't always translate well to frontier life. You'll need patience. I've dealt with difficult clients before." "I'm sure you have." Whitmore rose, signaling the meeting's end. "One more thing. This marriage is of utmost importance to our family's interests. I trust you understand that failure is not an option." The threat was politely delivered but unmistakable. Elijah nodded curtly. "I'll see her safely to Denver City. Judge, you have my word." As he turned to leave, Whitmore called after him. "She doesn't know you're coming. I thought it best to present it as a fait accompli. She'll be resistant at first." Elijah paused at the door. "Resistant to the journey or the marriage?" The judge's smile was cold. "That, Mr. Cole, is not your concern." Outside, Elijah made his way to Murphy's livery to check on his horse, a sturdy Mustang named Scout, who'd carried him through more tight spots than he cared to count. The familiar smell of hay and leather helped clear the mansion's perfumed air from his lungs. "Taking another job. Eli?" Old Murphy emerged from a stall, wiping his hands on a leather apron. "Escort duty. 6 weeks to Denver City." Murphy whistled low. "That's rough country this time of year. Cheyenne been active along the Smoky Hill Trail. You traveling alone?" "Me and a passenger." Elijah ran his hand along Scout's flank, checking for any signs of lameness. "Some Eastern lady heading to her wedding." "God help you." Murphy chuckled. "Had a fellow through here last week, asking about guides familiar with the Colorado route. Mean-looking sort with a scar across his throat. Turned him away. Didn't like his look." Something cold settled in Elijah's gut. He say what he needed a guide for? "Nope. Just said he had business in Colorado. Urgent business." Murphy spat tobacco juice into the sawdust. "You watch yourself out there. Eli, Something don't feel right about folks heading that way lately. That night, Elijah took a room at McBride's boarding house and spent the evening cleaning his weapons, his Navy Colt revolver, a Henry rifle, and a Bowie knife. Tools of survival in a land that didn't forgive carelessness. As he worked oil into the rifle's mechanism, his mind wandered to the job ahead. Escorting a spoiled Eastern girl across 800 miles of hostile territory for her wedding. He'd done worse for less money. But something about this arrangement nagged at him. The judge's urgency, the generous payment, the mention of family interests. It all pointed to complications he'd rather avoid. But $200 would set him up for months. Maybe even give him enough to head to California. Start fresh where the war and its ghosts couldn't follow. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it a cold wind from the north. Elijah saddled Scout and loaded his pack mule with supplies. Dried beef, hardtack, coffee, ammunition, medical supplies, and camping gear. He'd learned long ago that preparation meant the difference between a difficult journey and a fatal one. The Whitmore mansion looked different in the gray morning light, less imposing and more melancholy. A covered wagon waited in the circular drive, loaded with trunks and boxes that would be more at home on a steamship than a frontier trail. "You can't be serious," a woman's voice, clear and sharp as winter ice, cut through the morning air. "I won't travel with some hired gun." Elijah rounded the wagon to find the source of the voice and stopped short. Josephine Whitmore stood on the front steps, wearing a traveling dress of deep blue wool that probably cost more than he made in a year. She was younger than he'd expected, perhaps 23 or 24, with auburn hair swept up in an elaborate style that wouldn't last a day on the trail. Her green eyes blazed with fury as she faced her father. "Josephine, be reasonable," Judge Whitmore said, his tone suggesting this was a well-worn argument. "The territory is dangerous, mister. Cole comes highly recommended. I don't care if he comes recommended by President Grant himself." She turned those fierce eyes on Elijah, taking in his weathered face, trail clothes, and visible weapons with obvious distaste. "I don't need a bodyguard. If you insist on this farce of a marriage, at least allow me to travel with dignity." "Your dignity won't stop a Cheyenne arrow or a bandit's bullet," Elijah said mildly. "But if you'd prefer to make the journey alone, I'm happy to return the advance and find other work." She blinked, apparently surprised he'd addressed her directly. "You'd do that? Walk away from your fee?" "Ma'am, I've got no interest in dragging an unwilling woman across 800 miles of hard country. Either you want to get to Denver City safe, or you don't. Makes no difference to me." Judge Whitmore's face darkened. "Now see here, Cole. It's Miss Whitmore's decision." Elijah interrupted. "She's the one who'll be spending 6 weeks on the trail. If she'd rather take her chances alone, that's her choice to make." Josephine studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You're not what I expected." "Likewise, ma'am." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "Very well. Mr. Cole, since my father insists on treating me like cargo to be delivered, I suppose I have no choice but to accept your protection." She descended the steps with practiced grace, pausing beside him. "But understand this, I am not some frontier trollop to be ordered about. You'll address me as Miss Whitmore, and you'll keep your distance. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear. Miss Whitmore." He touched the brim of his hat. "We've got 3 hours of daylight to burn. Best get moving if we want to make Campbell's Creek by nightfall." She swept past him toward the wagon, head high and shoulders rigid. Judge Whitmore caught Elijah's arm as he turned to follow. "Remember what I said. Cole, safe delivery to Harrison Blackwood. Nothing more, nothing less." "Understood, Judge." But as Elijah watched Josephine supervise the loading of her trunks, berating a servant for rough handling, he wondered if either of them truly understood what they'd agreed to. The frontier had a way of stripping away pretense and revealing people's true nature. 6 weeks on the trail would test more than just their physical endurance. He helped Josephine into the wagon, noting how she avoided his touch as if he carried some contagion. Her maid, a timid girl named Mary, huddled among the luggage looking terrified. At least the judge had provided a decent team of mules and a Springfield wagon built for rough travel. "Ever driven a team before, Miss Whitmore?" Elijah asked as he checked the harnesses. "Of course not. That's what servants are for. Out here, everyone pulls their weight. Might want to learn." She gave him a look that could have curdled milk. "I'll keep that in mind. Mr. Cole." As they rolled out of Independence, Elijah riding alongside on Scout, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He'd developed a sixth sense for danger during the war, and right now it was screaming warnings. But the streets were empty except for early-rising shopkeepers and drowsy cowboys heading home from the saloons. The first few miles passed in tense silence. Josephine sat ramrod straight on the wagon seat, gloved hands folded in her lap, refusing to acknowledge the spectacular sunrise painting the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. Mary dozed fitfully among the luggage. "How long have you been doing this?" Josephine asked suddenly, surprising him. "Scouting? Since the war ended. And before that?" "3rd Colorado Cavalry. 4 years fighting for the Union." She digested this information. "My father said you were decorated. Your father says a lot of things." "Meaning?" Elijah shrugged. "Meaning medals don't count for much out here. The frontier doesn't care about your past, only whether you're smart enough to survive the present." "How reassuring." Her voice dripped sarcasm. "Any other pearls of wisdom you'd care to share?" "Just one. That fancy hairdo of yours won't last past noon. Might want to consider something more practical." She touched her elaborate coiffure self-consciously. "I'll manage. Thank you." By the time they stopped for the midday meal, her prediction had proved optimistic. The wind had pulled half her pins loose, leaving auburn strands whipping around her face. She'd also discovered that a corset designed for Boston drawing rooms was poorly suited for wagon travel over rutted trails. Elijah built a small fire and set coffee to boiling while the women stretched their legs. He noticed Josephine watching him work, her expression thoughtful. "Problem, Miss Whitmore?" "I'm simply observing. In Boston, making coffee requires a proper kitchen and servants. Out here, you manage with a pot and an open fire. Coffee's coffee, whether it's served in china cups or tin mugs." He poured her a cup, noting her slight grimace at the bitter brew. "Though I'll admit this isn't exactly drawing room quality." "It's fine." She took another sip, managing not to shudder. "How far to this Campbell's Creek?" "Another 15 miles, give or take. We'll camp there tonight. Get an early start tomorrow." "Camp?" Mary spoke up for the first time, voice tremulous. "Outside? Unless you've spotted a hotel I missed." Elijah's patience was wearing thin. "Yes, outside, under the stars, the way folks have been sleeping since before houses were invented." Josephine placed a calming hand on her maid's arm. "We'll be fine. Mary, Mr. Cole surely knows what he's doing." It was the first civil thing she'd said about him, and Elijah found himself oddly pleased. He packed up the noon camp and they pressed on, the landscape gradually shifting from settled farmland to open prairie. The sky stretched endless above them, a dome of brilliant blue marked only by high, wispy clouds. Despite herself, Josephine seemed captivated by the vastness. "I've never seen so much nothing," she murmured. "It's not nothing. It's everything." Elijah gestured at the waving grass. Buffalo grass, bluestem, switchgrass, each one adapted to survive out here. See those dark spots on the horizon? Buffalo wallows, where the herds roll in the dust. And that circling hawk? He's hunting prairie dogs. The whole land's alive, if you know how to look. She studied him with those green eyes. "You love it out here." "It's honest. The land doesn't lie or pretend to be something it's not. Survive or die, simple as that." Rather harsh philosophy. Maybe, but at least you know where you stand. They reached Campbell's Creek as the sun touched the western horizon. Elijah had camped here before, a reliable water source with good sight lines and shelter from the wind. He unhitched the team and set them to graze while the women watched uncertainly. "I'll need help with the tent," he said, unpacking canvas and poles. "Surely that's not—" Josephine began, then stopped. "Show me what to do." Together they erected a simple A-frame tent for the women. Elijah would sleep under the stars, as was his preference. He built a fire ring with practiced efficiency, soon having a cheerful blaze going against the gathering dusk. Dinner was salt pork, biscuits, and more coffee. Not fancy, but filling. Josephine ate without complaint, though Mary picked at her food like a nervous bird. As darkness fell, the vast prairie came alive with night sounds, coyotes calling in the distance, the rustle of small creatures in the grass, the endless whisper of wind. "I've never heard anything like it," Josephine said softly, speaking more to herself than him. "In Boston, there's always noise, carriages, people, city sounds, but this is what the world sounds like without us in it." Elijah said, "Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" "Yes." She shivered, pulling her shawl tighter. Small and very alone. He added another log to the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the star-filled sky. "You're not alone, Miss Whitmore. That's what I'm here for." She looked at him across the flames, firelight dancing in her eyes. For a moment, the hostility was gone, replaced by something almost vulnerable. "Tell me truthfully, Mr. Cole, have you ever lost someone on a journey like this?" The question hit closer than she could know. Sarah's face flashed through his memory, another strong-willed woman. Another journey that ended in tragedy. "Once," he admitted. "But that was different. Wartime. Different rules." "What happened?" "Cheyenne raid on a supply convoy. I was scouting ahead, thought the route was clear. I was wrong." He stared into the fire, seeing other flames, hearing other screams. "Lost half the convoy, including someone important to you." It wasn't a question. Elijah nodded shortly. "Like I said, different situation, won't happen again." "How can you be sure?" "Because I learned from it. Check everything twice. Trust your instincts. Never assume you're safe." He met her gaze squarely. "I'll get you to Denver City. Miss Whitmore, whatever else happens, you have my word on that." She was quiet for a long time, watching the fire burn down to coals. Mary had already retreated to the tent, soft snores drifting through the canvas. Finally, Josephine stood, brushing dust from her skirts. "Good night, Mr. Cole. Thank you for being honest with me." "Good night, Miss Whitmore." She paused at the tent flap. "Josephine, if we're to spend 6 weeks together, you might as well use my given name." Before he could respond, she disappeared inside. Elijah sat by the dying fire, rifle across his knees, and settled in for the first watch of many. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled, and he found himself thinking about green eyes and autumn hair, about promises made and promises broken. The journey had only just begun, but already he sensed that delivering Josephine Whitmore to her wedding would be the least of his challenges. The frontier had a way of changing people, stripping away the civilized veneer to reveal what lay beneath. He wondered what it would reveal about her. More importantly, he wondered what it would reveal about himself. The 4th day out from Independence brought them to the edge of the Flint Hills, where the trail wound through a maze of limestone ridges and narrow valleys. Elijah had been watching the western horizon all morning, not liking the wall of yellow-brown clouds building there. "We need to find shelter," he told Josephine, who had taken to riding beside him on the wagon seat while Mary dozed in back. "Dust storm coming." She squinted at the horizon. "It's miles away. Surely we have time?" "Out here, weather moves fast. Trust me." But the only shelter in sight was a narrow canyon cutting through the hills. Elijah didn't like it. Too many places for ambush, but with the storm bearing down, they had no choice. He urged the mules into the canyon just as the first gusts hit, carrying stinging sand and debris. "Get in the back with Mary," he shouted over the rising wind. "Cover yourselves with blankets." For once, Josephine didn't argue. She scrambled over the seat as Elijah fought to control the spooked mules. The world dissolved into a howling wall of dust and wind that turned day into twilight. He pulled his bandana over his nose and mouth. Squinting against the assault, Scout pressed close to the wagon, head down, trusting Elijah to guide them through. The canyon walls offered some protection, but the wind still screamed overhead, dropping visibility to mere feet. Elijah had weathered storms before, but always with proper shelter. Here, exposed in the narrow defile, they were vulnerable. Then, through the chaos, he heard it, the clatter of hooves on stone that didn't belong to their animals. He reached for his rifle, every nerve suddenly alert. "Stay down," he called to the women. "We've got company." 3 riders materialized from the storm like specters, bandanas covering their faces, guns drawn. Elijah's rifle was already aimed at the lead rider's chest. "That's far enough," he shouted. The leader, a lean man with cold eyes above his mask, raised a hand. "Easy there, friend. Just looking to share some shelter from the storm. No need for bloodshed. Plenty of canyon to go around. Find your own spot. Now that's not very neighborly." The man's eyes flicked to the wagon. "What you hauling that needs such fierce protection? None of your business. Move along." The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. 3 against 1 weren't good odds. But the narrow canyon worked in Elijah's favor. They couldn't flank him easily. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then Josephine's voice cut through the standoff. "Mr. Cole? Is everything all right?" The leader's eyes sharpened with interest. Well, lady passenger. Must be valuable cargo indeed." "The lady's traveling to her wedding," Elijah said evenly. "Nothing more. Now I won't ask again. Move along." For a long moment, nobody moved. The storm howled around them, dust devils dancing between the horses. Then the leader chuckled, a sound like grinding stone. "Wedding, eh? Lucky man." He tipped his hat mockingly. "We'll be seeing you, friend. Trail's a long way to Colorado." They melted back into the storm as quickly as they'd appeared. Elijah kept his rifle ready until he was certain they were gone, then slumped against the wagon seat, adrenaline leaving him shaky. "Are they gone?" Josephine peered out from the canvas, face pale with dust and fear. "For now, but we'll see them again. Men like that don't give up easy." "How do you know?" "Because I've been men like that." He spat dust from his mouth. During the war, when supply lines were cut and orders were more suggestion than rule, desperation makes thieves of honest men. She studied him with those penetrating eyes. "But not you. I had my moments, things I'm not proud of." He checked the storm, still raging but beginning to weaken. "We all did things to survive. Question is whether you let it define you after—" They waited out the storm, huddled in the canyon, Elijah keeping watch while the women tried to rest. When it finally passed, leaving them coated in fine dust, he immediately set about checking their gear and animals. "We're pushing through to Pawnee Rock," he decided. "It's a longer day than planned, but I want distance between us and those riders." Josephine emerged from the wagon, her once fine traveling dress now thoroughly trail-worn. She'd given up on her elaborate hairstyles, instead binding her auburn hair in a simple braid. The change made her look younger, more vulnerable. "I want to learn," she said suddenly. "Learn what?" "To shoot, to defend myself." She met his surprised look steadily. "You won't always be there. If those men come back—" Elijah considered her request. Teaching a proper Eastern lady to handle firearms went against everything her world stood for. But then, they weren't in her world anymore. "All right, tonight, after we make camp." They pressed on through the afternoon, the landscape growing more desolate with each mile. The storm had scoured away any softness, leaving behind a world of sharp edges and harsh beauty. Pawnee Rock rose from the plains like a ship from a grass sea, its sandstone face carved with countless names of travelers who'd passed before. Camp that night was tense, everyone aware they were being watched from somewhere out in the darkness. Elijah built the fire small, not wanting to provide an easy target. After a quick meal, he brought out his spare revolver. "First rule," he said, checking the chamber was empty before handing it to Josephine. "Never point it at anything you don't intend to kill." She took the weapon gingerly, surprised by its weight. Mary watched from the tent, scandalized by the impropriety of it all. It's heavier than I expected. Everything's heavier out here, consequences especially. He showed her how to hold it properly, how to sight down the barrel. Don't jerk the trigger, squeeze it gentle, like you're pressing a flower. She raised an eyebrow at the comparison. You have experience pressing flowers, Mr. Cole. Had a life before the war. Even pressed a few flowers for... He stopped, jaw tightening. Ancient history. Focus on the target. He'd set up a row of empty cans 30 feet away. Start close, work your way back, and remember... The gun roared, making her yelp and nearly drop it. The shot went wide, hitting nothing but prairie. Warn me next time, she gasped. Nobody warns you in real life. Again. She gritted her teeth and tried again. And again. By the 10th shot, she was hitting cans consistently. There was a fierce concentration in her face that reminded him of soldiers he'd trained. Green boys learning to kill before they'd properly learned to shave. You're a quick study, he admitted. I had excellent tutors in Boston. Piano, French, mathematics. She smiled wryly. Though somehow gunfighting never made the curriculum. Different kind of education out here. She handed the gun back, massaging her wrist. Tell me about her. Who? The woman you were going to mention. The one you pressed flowers for. Elijah busied himself cleaning the revolver. Nothing to tell. You loved her. Yes. And she died. Yes. Josephine was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. I shouldn't pry. It's all right. He looked up at the stars, brilliant in the clear prairie night. Sarah McKenna, preacher's daughter from Kansas City. Hair like corn silk and a smile that could light up a room. We were going to marry after the war. What happened? I happened. Made promises I couldn't keep. The war ended, but I came back different. Broken. She tried to understand. But how do you explain what it's like to watch your friends die in mud and blood? How do you tell a preacher's daughter about the things you did to survive? So you left her? I thought I was protecting her. From me. From what I'd become. His laugh was bitter. She followed anyway. Joined a wagon train heading west. Said she'd find me or die trying. Josephine's face had gone very still. The Cheyenne Raid. The Cheyenne Raid? He holstered the revolver with careful precision. I failed her twice. Once by leaving, once by not being there when she needed me. That's not... Yes, it is. He stood abruptly. Get some sleep. We've got ground to cover tomorrow. She rose as well, brushing dust from her skirts. Elijah? It was the first time she'd used his given name. He paused, but didn't turn. Thank you for teaching me, for trusting me with her memory. He nodded once and walked into the darkness beyond the fire, behind him. He heard her talking softly to Mary, preparing for bed, but sleep would be a long time coming for him. It always was when the ghosts came calling. The night passed without incident, though Elijah caught glimpses of campfires in the distance. Their shadows were patient, waiting for the right moment. He'd have to be more careful. Maybe leave the main trail for a while. Morning brought a change in the weather. Cooler, with clouds building in the north. The autumn storms were coming early this year. They broke camp quickly. Josephine now helping with practiced efficiency instead of standing aside. You're different than I expected, she said as they rolled out. How so? Father made you sound like just another rough frontiersman, all violence and crude manners. She glanced at him sideways. But you quote poetry when you think no one's listening. You notice beauty in the landscape. You carry pain like a physical weight. Don't make me into something I'm not. I'm exactly what your father hired. A man who's good at violence when violence is needed. Perhaps, but I think that's the least interesting thing about you. Before he could respond, Scout's ears pricked forward, and Elijah's hand went to his rifle. A moment later, he saw what had alerted his horse, a overturned wagon ahead, one wheel spinning lazily in the breeze. "Stay here," he told Josephine. But she was already climbing down. Someone might be hurt, or it might be a trap, but she was already hurrying forward, and he had no choice but to follow, scanning for threats. The wagon had been ransacked, contents scattered across the prairie. No bodies, but blood stained the wagon seat. Fresh blood. "Over here," Josephine called. She'd found the driver crawling through the grass, an arrow protruding from his shoulder. "Please," the man gasped. "My family. They took my family." Elijah knelt beside him, assessing the wound. Survivable, if treated soon. "Who took them? Indians?" "No, white men, dressed like Indians. Took my wife, my daughter." The man clutched Elijah's shirt. "Please, she's only 15. Josephine had gone pale. "We have to help them." "We don't even know which way they went." "Then find out." Her green eyes blazed. "You're supposed to be this great tracker, aren't you?" He wanted to tell her it was none of their business, that getting involved would only put her in danger. But looking at her fierce expression, remembering another woman who'd needed help and hadn't gotten it, he found himself nodding. "Mary, tend his wound," he ordered. "Josephine, get the medical supplies. I'll cut for sign." It didn't take long to find the trail. 6 riders heading northeast, moving fast but not bothering to hide their tracks. They were confident, cocky. That would be their mistake. "I can catch them," he told Josephine. "But not with the wagon. I'd have to go alone." "Then I'm coming with you." "Like hell you are. That could be me." She gestured at the wounded man. "That could be any woman traveling out here. I won't sit by and do nothing." "Your father." "My father isn't here. And if he were, I'd tell him the same thing I'm telling you. Some things matter more than reaching Colorado on schedule." He studied her, this complex woman who was nothing like he'd expected. "Can you ride? Really ride? Not some side-saddle trot through a Boston park?" "I can learn." Against his better judgment, he found himself saddling the gentlest of their spare horses. "If we do this, you follow my orders without question. No heroics, no arguments. We get those people back and get out." Agreed. They left Mary with the wounded man and the wagon, Elijah trusting that the raiders wouldn't double back while they had fresh captives to concern them. He set a hard pace, Josephine gamely keeping up despite her inexperience. The trail led to a series of low bluffs cut by dry washes, perfect ambush country. Elijah signaled for quiet, and they dismounted, creeping forward on foot. The raiders had made camp in a wash, confident in their isolation. Elijah counted 6 men, just as the tracks had indicated. The woman and girl were tied to a wagon wheel, clothing torn but apparently unharmed so far. "Wait here," he breathed in Josephine's ear. "When the shooting starts, get to the captives. Cut them free and get them out." "What about you?" "I'll manage." He circled wide, using every scrap of cover. The war had taught him patience, how to move like smoke through hostile territory. The raiders were passing a bottle, laughing at something. They never saw him coming. His first shot took the leader in the chest, spinning him into the fire. The second dropped a man reaching for his rifle. Then chaos erupted. Gunfire and shouts and confusion. Josephine didn't wait. She sprinted from cover, a knife in hand, making for the captives. A raider saw her and swung his gun around, but Elijah's shot took him in the shoulder before he could fire. "The woman! Get the woman!" someone shouted. Elijah rolled behind a boulder as bullets whined overhead. 3 down, 3 to go. He could see Josephine sawing at the ropes, the captive woman trying to shield her daughter. A raider broke from cover, rushing Josephine. Elijah's rifle clicked empty. No time to reload. He drew his revolver, but the angle was wrong. Josephine in the line of fire. Then she turned, the spare revolver he'd trained her with appearing in her hand. The shot was wild, but close enough to make the raider dive for cover. It gave Elijah the opening he needed. When the smoke cleared, 6 raiders lay dead or dying. Josephine stood among them, gun still raised, face white with shock at what she'd done. "You did good," Elijah told her, gently taking the weapon. "You saved them. I almost shot a man. Almost only counts in horseshoes." Come on, let's get these folks back to their wagon. The reunion was tearful, the family grateful beyond words. But Elijah kept watching the horizons, knowing the sound of gunfire carried far on the prairie. They needed to move. Back at their own wagon, they found Mary had done well with the wounded man. He'd live, though the arm might never be quite right. Elijah made the decision to travel together for safety, at least until they reached Fort Larned. That night, with both camps combined for protection, Josephine sat apart from the others, staring into the fire. Elijah brought her coffee and sat beside her. "It's different when it's real," she said quietly. "Shooting cans is one thing, shooting at a person. First time's always hard. Gets easier. That's what worries me." She looked at him. "Do you regret teaching me?" "No, you needed to know. Out here, sometimes violence is the only answer." He paused. "But I hope you never have to use it again." "So do I." She was quiet for a moment. "Those men from the storm, they're still following us, aren't they?" "Probably. Will you have to kill them too?" "Maybe. Depends on how determined they are." She shivered, and without thinking, he put his arm around her shoulders. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed against him. They sat that way for a while, two people finding unexpected comfort in the middle of an unforgiving land. "I'm not who I was 4 days ago," she said finally. "The trail changes everyone. Question is, do you like who you're becoming?" She considered this. "I don't know yet, but I know I'm more than just cargo to be delivered." She stood, brushing off her skirts. "Good night, Elijah. Good night, Josephine." As she walked to her tent, he noticed she no longer moved with the studied grace of a Boston lady. Her stride had become something more natural, more suited to the frontier. The transformation had begun, and he wondered where it would end. In the distance, coyotes called to each other across the empty miles, and somewhere out there, patient as death, their shadows waited. They parted ways with the rescued family at Fort Larned, where soldiers confirmed Elijah's worst suspicions. The men from the dust storm had been asking questions, showing particular interest in wagons bound for Colorado. The post commander, a grizzled captain named Walsh, pulled Elijah aside. "Jake Bonner's gang," Walsh said, naming the cold-eyed leader. "They've been working this stretch for months. Never seen them this far west, though must be after something special." Elijah didn't mention Josephine or her prominent father. "We'll take the southern route, stay off the main trail. That's rough country. Early snows have already hit the Raton Pass. We'll manage." Walsh studied him. "I could spare 2 men as escort. Appreciate it, but no. Smaller group moves faster." Leaving the fort, Elijah turned them southwest toward the Arkansas River, abandoning the well-traveled Santa Fe Trail for lesser-known paths. The detour would add days to their journey, but it might keep them ahead of Bonner's gang. "Why are those men so persistent?" Josephine asked as they entered a region of broken badlands and sandstone mesas. "Surely there are easier targets. Your father's a wealthy man. Word travels." Elijah had been dreading this conversation. "There's something else. That marriage of yours. Harrison Blackwood doesn't just own mines. He controls water rights, railroad easements, political connections. Whoever controls him controls half of Colorado." Her voice was flat. "And whoever controls his wife controls him. I'm not just a bride. I'm a business transaction." "You knew?" "Of course I knew. Father's been planning this for years. Why do you think I was so angry?" She laughed bitterly. "I'm not a person to him. I'm a commodity to be traded for influence." They pushed deeper into the Badlands as the day waned, the landscape growing increasingly hostile. Twisted junipers clung to cliff faces, and the trail narrowed to barely more than a goat path. As they rounded a sharp bend, Elijah's worst fears materialized. A landslide had blocked the route completely. "We'll have to backtrack," he said, studying the jumbled rocks. "Lost us half a day." But as they turned the wagon, he heard it, the rumble of displaced stones from above. His battlefield instinct screamed danger. "Run!" He slapped the mule's rumps hard. "Move!" The hillside came apart in a roar of dust and stone. Elijah grabbed Scout's reins with one hand and Josephine with the other, hauling her from the wagon seat as tons of rock crashed down where they'd been moments before. They hit the ground hard, rolling away as the landslide swept the wagon off the trail. Mary's scream cut through the chaos before being swallowed by the thunderous cascade. When the dust settled, the wagon was gone, buried under tons of rubble. Of Mary. There was no sign. "Mary!" Josephine scrambled toward the slide, but Elijah caught her. "We have to help her. She's gone." He held her as she fought him, then collapsed against his chest, sobbing. "I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do. This is my fault. If I hadn't insisted on leaving the main trail. This wasn't natural." Elijah studied the cliff face, seeing tool marks, the deliberate placement of the slide. "Bonner's work. He's hurting us." Josephine pulled back, eyes red but suddenly focused. "Into what?" "Nothing good. They salvaged what they could from their pack animals, bedrolls, some food, ammunition, his rifle. Everything else was buried with poor Mary. As night fell, they took shelter in a shallow cave, no fire to betray their position." "What do we do now?" Josephine asked, her voice steady despite everything. "We survive, get to high ground at first light, find a way around, and then, one problem at a time." She was quiet for a while, pressed against him for warmth in the cold desert night. "Tell me we'll make it. We'll make it, liar." "Maybe, but it's a good lie." She laughed despite herself. "A sound like water in the desert. You're a strange man, Elijah Cole, cynical and hopeful at the same time. War does that, shows you the worst of humanity, but also the best. Men dying for strangers, sharing their last water, carrying wounded enemies to safety." He shifted, checking the cave entrance. "You see enough of both. You learn to expect nothing and hope for everything. Which am I, the worst or the best?" He looked down at her. "This Boston lady turned frontier survivor. You're something else entirely." "What?" "Unexpected." They dozed fitfully, taking turns on watch, near dawn. Elijah heard movement outside. He touched Josephine's shoulder, and she came instantly alert. Another change the trail had wrought. 3 men were examining the landslide by moonlight. Not Bonner's gang. These were Apache, probably a hunting party. They could be allies or enemies, depending on their mood and tribal affiliation. One of them found tracks leading to the cave. He called softly to the others, and they approached with the fluid grace of men born to this land. "Stay calm," Elijah whispered. "Let me talk." He stepped out slowly, hands visible but near his weapons. The lead Apache was young, perhaps 25, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "You are the ones who killed the white raiders," the Apache said in accented English. It wasn't a question. They had captives. Women. "We know. We watched." The warrior studied him. "You fight like a soldier, but you travel with only a woman now. Strange. Our companion died in the landslide, the one your enemies caused. Not our enemies, yours." The Apache smiled thinly. "The man Bonner seeks someone, offers many guns for information, and we do not like Bonner. He sells whiskey to our young men, steals our women." The warrior glanced past him to where Josephine stood in the cave mouth. "Your woman, she is important. She's under my protection." "Ah." The warrior seemed to come to a decision. "There is another trail, old, difficult. We will show you, for a price. Name it. The rifles you took from the raiders. We have need of such weapons." Elijah had grabbed 3 rifles from the ambush site, knowing they might prove valuable. "Done. Come. We must move before the sun finds us." The Apache trail was indeed old and difficult, winding through narrow slots in the rock where they had to lead the horses single file. The warriors moved ahead and behind, silent as shadows. Josephine stayed close to Elijah, trusting his judgment. They climbed steadily upward, the air growing thin and cold. By midday, they'd reached a high plateau dotted with pine and aspen, their leaves already turning gold with early autumn. "From here, you go north," the lead warrior said, pointing to a distant pass. 2 days to the mining town of Trinidad. Bonner cannot follow this way. His horses are too soft, his men too clumsy. We're grateful, Elijah said, handing over the promised rifles. The warrior examined the weapons with satisfaction, then looked at Josephine. Your woman is stronger than she appears. The land has marked her. What do you mean? Some people the land rejects. Others, it claims. She has been claimed. He smiled at Josephine. You will not have the life you expected, white woman, but perhaps you will have the life you need. With that cryptic pronouncement, the Apache melted away into the forest, leaving them alone on the high plateau. What did he mean? Josephine asked. About the land claiming me? Apache believe the land chooses people, changes them to match its needs. It's their way of explaining why some folks thrive out here while others wither. And have I been changed? Elijah looked at her, travel-worn dress, sun-darkened skin, calloused hands, eyes that had seen death and kept their strength. What do you think? Instead of answering, she moved to the edge of the plateau, gazing out at the vast expanse of mountains and valleys spread below. The wind whipped her auburn braid, and for a moment she looked wild, untamed, like she'd always belonged to this fierce landscape. I can't go back, she said quietly. Even if we reach Colorado, even if I marry Harrison Blackwood, I can't go back to being that sheltered girl from Boston. Nobody's asking you to, aren't they? She turned to face him. What do you think happens when we reach Trinidad? You collect your fee, deliver me like the cargo I am, and ride away? That was the plan. Was. The word hung between them, loaded with possibility. Elijah found himself moving closer, drawn by something stronger than wisdom. Plans change, he said roughly. Do they? She was close enough now that he could see gold flecks in her green eyes, count the freckles the sun had brought out across her nose. What's changed, Elijah? You know what? I want to hear you say it. I can't. Your promise to another man. I gave my word to your father. Words. She laughed, but there was pain in it. Is that all we are? Promises and obligations and words? Sometimes words are all that separate us from chaos, and sometimes they're chains that keep us from living. She reached up, fingers tracing the scar on his jaw where a Confederate saber had marked him years ago. The touch was electric, sending heat through him like lightning. Josephine, I know, she whispered. I know all the reasons why not. But out here, with death following us and civilization so far away, do those reasons matter? He caught her hand, meaning to push it away. Instead, he found himself pressing it against his cheek, closing his eyes against the sweetness of it. They have to matter, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Why? Because I've already lost one woman I loved. I won't survive losing another. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Josephine's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't pull away. Then don't lose me, she said simply. He kissed her then, all his carefully maintained control shattering like ice in spring. She met him with equal fervor, months of proper Boston breeding falling away to reveal the passionate woman beneath. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the world had shifted on its axis. This complicates things, Elijah said. Everything about my life is complicated. She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. At least this complication is my choice. They made camp early that day, finding a sheltered grove near a clear mountain stream. Without the wagon, their supplies were limited, but somehow it didn't matter. They worked together with the ease of long partnership, gathering wood, tending the horses, preparing a simple meal. As darkness fell and the stars emerged in brilliant profusion, they sat close beside the fire, no longer pretending distance. Josephine had changed into men's clothing scavenged from their supplies. It was more practical for riding, she claimed, though Elijah suspected she was shedding more than just her dress. What happens when we reach Trinidad? She asked, voicing the question they'd both been avoiding. I don't know. You could leave. Before we get there, tell them I died in the landslide with Mary. You want me to lie? I want to be free. She stared into the fire. Is that so terrible? To want to choose my own life? No, but freedom has a price. Your father would hunt us both. Black would too, probably. We'd be fugitives. We already are. At least we'd be fugitives together. The offer tempted him more than he could say. To disappear into the vast frontier with her. Find some hidden valley where the past couldn't follow. But he'd tried running before. The past always found you. There might be another way, he said slowly. Blackwood's a businessman. Everything's negotiable to men like him. You think he'd release me from the engagement? For the right price. Question is, what do we have that he wants more than a judge's daughter? Josephine was quiet for a long moment. Then, information about Bonner's gang, about the attempt on my life. If Blackwood knew someone was trying to prevent the marriage that badly, he'd want to know why. It's thin. It's something. She leaned against his shoulder. Better than running. Better than giving up. They talked late into the night. Planning, dreaming, carefully avoiding the subject of their stolen kiss. But when Josephine finally dozed off against him, Elijah allowed himself a moment of pure contentment. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent. Somewhere in the darkness, predators hunted prey, the eternal dance of survival playing out. But here, in this small circle of firelight, two damaged souls had found something worth fighting for. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Bonner was still out there, patient as a rattlesnake. Trinidad was still days away, and with it, all the complications of civilization. But tonight, Elijah held Josephine close and allowed himself to believe that sometimes, against all odds, the world might grant a second chance at happiness. The Apache warrior had been right. The land had claimed them both, stripping away who they'd been to reveal who they might become. The question now was whether they were brave enough to accept the transformation. As the fire died to embers and the night grew cold, Elijah pulled a blanket around them both. Josephine murmured in her sleep, pressing closer. He breathed in the scent of her hair, memorizing this moment against whatever came next. The trail ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, he had a reason to see it through. Not for money, not for honor, but for the possibility of a future written in their own hand. In the distance, a wolf howled, calling to its mate across the empty miles. Elijah smiled grimly and held Josephine tighter. Let Bonner come. Let the whole world come. He'd found something worth defending, and this time, he wouldn't fail. The next 2 days passed in a strange mixture of tension and sweetness. They rode hard through mountain passes and alpine meadows, always watching for signs of pursuit, but in the quiet moments between, something had fundamentally shifted. The careful distance they'd maintained was gone, replaced by casual touches, shared smiles, and 1,000 small intimacies. On the second night, with Trinidad just a day's ride away, they made camp beside a mountain lake so perfectly still it mirrored the stars. The temperature had dropped sharply, autumn asserting itself in earnest, and their single fire seemed small against the vast darkness. Tomorrow changes everything, Josephine said, sitting close beside him, their shoulders touching. Maybe not. Elijah poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. We still have choices. Do we? She turned to look at him, face half in shadow. Sometimes I feel like we're just leaves in a river, swept along by currents we can't control. Even leaves can catch on branches, find eddies, change course. He met her gaze. Nothing's written until we write it. She smiled sadly. You're more romantic than you pretend to be. Don't let that get around. I have a reputation to maintain. The attempt at levity fell flat. They both knew that by tomorrow night, everything would be decided one way or another. The freedom of the trail, the simplicity of survival, would give way to the complex realities of civilization. I wish, Josephine started, then stopped. What? I wish we could just stay here, build a cabin, live off the land, forget the rest of the world exists. It's a nice dream, but just a dream. Dreams have power, Sometimes they become real if you want them badly enough. She shifted closer, and he put his arm around her, drawing her against his side. Do you want it badly enough, Elijah? What I want and what's right aren't always the same thing. That's not an answer. He was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with truths he'd kept buried. Yes, he said finally. I want it. Want you. More than I've wanted anything since Sarah. Since Sarah. The name no longer hurt to say. He realized, somewhere on this journey, the wound had finally begun to heal. But wanting isn't enough. You deserve better than a life in hiding. What if I disagree? What if I think a life in hiding with you is better than a life in the open with a man I don't love? Then I'd say the trail has made you delirious. She pulled back to look at him. I'm serious. Elijah, when we get to Trinidad, I'm going to tell Blackwood I won't marry him. Whatever happens after that, happens. Your father can disown me if he wishes. I'm through being a pawn in his games. You say that now, but you've never been poor, never gone hungry, never. She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and desperate. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I know what I'm choosing, she whispered. I'm choosing you. The weight of her declaration settled over him like a physical thing. He'd been prepared for many things on this journey, but not this. Not her complete, terrifying trust. Josephine, no more words, she said. We've talked enough. Tomorrow will bring what it brings. Tonight is ours. She stood, taking his hand, leading him away from the fire to where their bedrolls lay beneath a canopy of stars. The night was cold, but her touch was warm, and when she kissed him again, all his carefully reasoned objections crumbled like sand. They came together with a desperate tenderness, two souls seeking comfort against the uncertainty ahead. Each touch was a promise, each whispered endearment, a rebellion against the roles the world had assigned them. In the darkness beside the mountain lake, they wrote their own story, if only for one night. Later, as they lay entwined beneath shared blankets, Josephine traced patterns on his chest, her fingers finding old scars and new. Tell me about this one, she said, touching a puckered mark near his shoulder. Shrapnel, Battle of Chickamauga. And this, knife fight in Abilene, disagreement over cards. You've been marked by violence. We all carry our histories. Some just show more than others. She was quiet for a moment. What marks will I carry from this journey? Stronger ones than scars, the kind that change who you are inside. I'm not afraid. I know. That's what terrifies me. She rose up on one elbow to look at him. Why? Because courage without fear is just recklessness. And I can't lose you to recklessness. You won't lose me at all, she said firmly. I won't let you. He wanted to believe her, but dawn was already painting the eastern peaks rose and gold, and with it came the return of reality. They broke camp in companionable silence, both aware that something fundamental had shifted in the night. The trail down from the mountains was steep and treacherous, requiring all their concentration. But Elijah couldn't stop stealing glances at Josephine. She rode with new confidence, handling her horse with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle. By midday, they could see Trinidad spread out in the valley below, a rough mining town that had sprouted up around the confluence of rivers and railroad lines. Smoke from a dozen smelters hazed the air, and even from a distance, they could hear the industrial clamor. Last chance to run, Elijah said as they paused at an overlook. I'm not running. Josephine straightened in her saddle. Whatever happens, we face it together. They descended into town as the afternoon sun slanted low. Trinidad was everything Elijah expected. Muddy streets, false-fronted buildings, saloons and brothels mixed with mercantiles and assay offices. The Grand Hotel, where Blackwood kept his offices, stood out like a sore thumb, all brick and Victorian pretension. Wait here, Elijah said as they reached the hotel. Let me scout the situation first. But Josephine was already dismounting. We go together or not at all. He knew that tone. Argument would be useless. They tied their horses and entered the hotel lobby, drawing stares from the well-dressed patrons. Trail dust and rough clothes marked them as outsiders in this temple to new money. "We need to see Harrison Blackwood," Elijah told the desk clerk, a nervous man with pomaded hair. "Mr. Blackwood is in a meeting. If you'd care to wait, tell him Judge Whitmore's daughter has arrived." Josephine's voice cut like crystal. "I think he'll make time." The clerk's eyes widened. He scurried away, returning moments later with an invitation to the third-floor suite. They climbed carpeted stairs, Elijah's hand near his gun, every instinct screaming danger. Harrison Blackwood's office was a study in calculated wealth, leather and mahogany, crystal decanters, maps of mining claims covering the walls. The man himself stood by the window, younger than Elijah had expected, perhaps 35, with the soft look of someone who paid others to do his hard work. "Miss Whitmore." Blackwood didn't turn from the window. "You're late, and considerably more rustic than anticipated. Mr. Blackwood." Josephine's voice was steady. "We need to talk." "Indeed we do." He finally turned, eyes sliding dismissively over Elijah before fixing on Josephine. "Your father wired 2 days ago. Apparently, there was concern you might not arrive at all. There were complications on the trail. So I gathered. Your escort can wait outside. This is a private matter." "He stays," Josephine said firmly. "What I have to say involves him." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "I see. How disappointing. I'd hoped the judge's daughter would have more discretion. This isn't what you think." "Isn't it?" His voice turned cold. "You arrived days late, dressed like a common trail hand, insisting your hired guide be present for our discussion. What else am I to think?" "You can think whatever you like," Josephine said. "But first, you should know someone tried to kill us." "Multiple times. The Bonner gang has been tracking us since independence." That got his attention. "Bonner? He's been paid to stay clear of my interests." "Well, someone paid him more to interfere with this particular interest." Elijah spoke for the first time. "Question is who and why." Blackwood moved to his desk, fingers drumming on the polished surface. "You're suggesting someone wants to prevent this marriage badly enough to hire killers?" "That's exactly what we're suggesting," Josephine said. "The question is, who benefits if our arrangement fails?" "Several parties. Actually." Blackwood poured himself whiskey, not offering any to his guests. "I have competitors who'd love to see my alliance with your father crumble. Your father has enemies who'd enjoy watching his plans fail. And then there's—" He trailed off, eyes calculating. "There's what?" Elijah prompted. "Nothing. Business matters." But his tell was obvious, a slight twitch of his left eye that any poker player would recognize. "Mr. Blackwood," Josephine said, "I came here to dissolve our engagement, but now I'm wondering if there's more at stake than anyone told me." "Dissolve?" He laughed, but it was forced. "My dear girl, you can't simply dissolve a contract because the journey was difficult." "This isn't about the journey." She moved closer to his desk. "This is about honesty. What aren't you telling me? What's really at stake here?" Blackwood was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. "Sit, both of you. This may take some explaining." They took chairs across from his desk, Elijah keeping his hand free for his gun. Blackwood noticed and smiled grimly. "Expecting trouble, Mr. Cole, and I always expect trouble. Wise man." Blackwood refreshed his drink. "Very well. Cards on the table. This marriage isn't just about uniting our family's interests. It's about preventing a war." "A war?" Josephine leaned forward. "What kind of war?" "The kind that's been brewing since the railroad came west. Control of water rights, mineral claims, transportation routes. It all hinges on political influence. Your father controls judges and legislators in Missouri. I control them in Colorado. Together, we can maintain peace. Apart, someone else steps into the vacuum." Elijah finished. "Someone like Samuel Morrison." Blackwood's eye twitched again. "You know Morrison?" Know of him, railroad baron out of Kansas. Been buying up land along the proposed southern route. Buying up and forcing out. Blackwood corrected. Morrison doesn't believe in competition. He believes in monopoly. If he can prevent this marriage, break the alliance between your father and me, he gains control of both territories. Josephine said slowly, My God, this was never about me at all. Everything is about power. Miss Whitmore. You're simply the currency in this particular transaction. She stood abruptly. No, I refuse to be anyone's currency. Refuse all you like. The stakes remain the same. Blackwood's voice hardened. Walk away from this marriage, and Morrison wins. How many small ranchers and farmers will he destroy? How many towns will he strangle with his monopolies? That's not my responsibility. Isn't it? He leaned back in his chair. You wanted honesty. Here it is. Marry me, and we maintain balance. Refuse, and watch Morrison turn this territory into his personal kingdom. Your choice. The room fell silent except for the tick of an ornate clock. Elijah watched Josephine struggle with the weight of revelation. Saw the moment her shoulders sagged under it. There has to be another way, she said quietly. Perhaps. Blackwood studied them both. You say Bonner's been trying to kill you. Prove Morrison hired him, and everything changes. Without Morrison, the other vultures will circle but lack the power to act. How do we prove it? Elijah asked. Bonner's still out there, isn't he? Bring him in. Make him talk. Blackwood smiled coldly. I'll even pay your standard rate, Mr. Cole. Consider it a wedding gift. And if we succeed, Josephine asked, if we prove Morrison's involvement, then perhaps we can discuss alternative arrangements. A business partnership without the marriage component. Your father won't like it, but if the threat is neutralized. He let it hang. Elijah recognized the negotiation for what it was. A slim hope offered to desperate people, but it was better than nothing. We'll need resources, he said. Men, weapons, information on Bonner's whereabouts. Done. Blackwood moved to his desk, writing quickly. This will get you whatever you need from my people, but understand, you have 1 week. After that, the marriage proceeds as planned, or I align with Morrison myself. Self-preservation. You understand. We understand. Josephine took the paper. 1 week. They left the office in tense silence, the weight of new knowledge heavy between them. On the street, Josephine finally spoke. A week to catch a killer and prevent a war. Simple enough. Nothing about this is simple anymore. No, she agreed. But at least now we know what we're really fighting for and against. Elijah touched her arm. You don't have to do this. We could still run. And let Morrison win? Let him destroy innocent people? She shook her head. The Apache warrior was right. The land has claimed me. These are my people now. Even if they don't know it, I won't abandon them. He saw Sarah in her then, not in looks, but in spirit. The same fierce determination to do right, regardless of cost. It terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. Then we'd better get started, he said. Bonner won't catch himself. As they walked toward the livery to arrange fresh horses, neither noticed the figure watching from a second-story window. By the time they'd left town, heading back into the wilderness they'd just escaped. A rider was already carrying news to interested parties. The game had changed, but the players remained the same. And somewhere out in the vast Colorado territory, Jake Bonner waited, unaware that he'd become the prey instead of the predator. The hunt was on. The trail back into the mountains felt different this time. They were hunters now, not prey, though Elijah knew how quickly those roles could reverse. Blackwood had been true to his word. They'd left Trinidad with fresh horses, ample supplies, and information from his network of informants. Jake Bonner had been spotted near Phantom Canyon, licking his wounds and recruiting new men. We'll need to be smart about this, Elijah said as they made camp the first night. Bonner's dangerous when cornered. Then we don't corner him. Josephine cleaned her revolver with practiced efficiency. A far cry from the woman who'd flinched at firearms just days ago. We draw him out. With what bait? She looked up, green eyes steady. Me? Absolutely not. Think about it. He's been paid to stop this marriage. If he hears I'm traveling back to Trinidad with minimal guard, trying to escape the wedding. She shrugged. He'll come to us? It's too dangerous. Everything we do is dangerous. She set aside the gun, moving to sit beside him. But this is our best chance. You know it is. He did know it, which made it worse. Using Josephine as bait went against every protective instinct he'd developed, but tactically, she was right. Bonner would be cautious about walking into a trap, but if he thought he had another chance at his target, we'd need backup, he said finally. Blackwood's men are already in position. I had him station them along the route while you were getting supplies. At his surprised look, she smiled. I'm learning to think ahead. When did you arrange that? While you were playing the protective escort. I may be new to this, but I'm not helpless. I never said you were. You think it, though, every time you try to shield me from danger. She touched his face gently. I know it comes from caring, but I need you to trust me as a partner, not just protect me as a woman. The distinction hit home. He'd been treating her like Sarah, someone to be guarded, kept safe, but Josephine had proven herself capable of far more than he'd given her credit for. You're right, he admitted. Partners. Partners. She sealed it with a kiss, then pulled back. All business. Now, let's plan how to catch ourselves an outlaw. They spent the next 2 days laying groundwork. Word was spread through carefully chosen saloons and trading posts. Judge Whitmore's daughter was fleeing her arranged marriage, heading back east with only a single guard. They made themselves visible in small towns, Josephine playing the part of desperate runaway, while Elijah appeared tired and distracted. The third night, camped in a box canyon Elijah had scouted carefully, they got their first nibble. Scout's ears pricked forward, and Elijah heard it too, the subtle sounds of men trying to move quietly through broken country. They're here, he breathed, banking the fire lower. Josephine nodded, moving to her assigned position with calm efficiency. They drilled this scenario, knew their roles. She would remain visible by the fire while Elijah melted into the shadows. The attack came from 3 directions at once. Bonner had learned from their previous encounters. 6 men burst from cover, guns drawn, expecting easy prey. Instead, they found themselves in a crossfire as Blackwood's men emerged from concealment. Drop your weapons, Elijah commanded, rifle trained on Bonner's chest. For a moment, the scene balanced on a knife's edge. Then Bonner laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Well played, Cole, though I should have known the girl had more spine than she showed. It's over. Jake, put down the guns. Is it? Bonner's eyes glittered in the firelight. You think taking me changes anything? Morrison has deep pockets. There'll be others. Then we'll stop them too, Josephine said, emerging from cover with her revolver steady. But you first. Bonner studied her with something like respect. You've changed, Princess. Trail does that to some folks. Makes them harder. Hard enough to pull this trigger if needed. I believe you. He slowly unbuckled his gun belt, letting it fall. All right, boys, we're done here. His men followed suit, though reluctantly, as Blackwood's men moved in to secure the prisoners. Bonner caught Elijah's eye. She's something, isn't she? The kind of woman who could make a man reconsider his line of work. Shut up, Jake. Just saying, I can see why Morrison wanted her stopped. Woman like that marries into power, no telling what might happen, might even develop a conscience. Morrison, Josephine said sharply. You admit he hired you. Admit? Bonner laughed again. Hell, I'll testify to it. Man left me hanging out to dry. Promised reinforcements that never came. Payment that's been slow in arriving. Far as I'm concerned, he can rot. You'll testify in court? For the right incentive. My boys and I walk free. Morrison takes the fall. Seems fair to me. Elijah started to object, but Josephine raised a hand. We'll need more than your word. Documents, proof of payment, something concrete. Got it all, man like Morrison. Thinks he's too big to fall. Gets sloppy. Leaves paper trails. Bonner grinned. Hidden back at my camp. Take you there myself, if you guarantee our freedom. No deal. One of Blackwood's men said, these men are wanted in 3 territories. Then they'd better disappear into Mexico. Josephine interrupted. After they fulfilled their part of the bargain. The negotiations took another hour, but eventually, terms were reached. Bonner and his men would provide evidence against Morrison in exchange for safe passage south. It stuck in Elijah's craw to let killers walk free, but the larger game demanded sacrifices. They reached Bonner's camp near dawn, a fortified cabin hidden in a narrow valley. True to his word, the outlaw produced a leather satchel filled with incriminating documents, telegrams from Morrison, bank drafts, detailed instructions about preventing the Whitmore-Blackwood marriage. Man never learned the first rule of crime, Bonner said, watching Josephine examine the papers. Never put anything in writing you wouldn't want read in court. This is enough, she said. More than enough. Then our business is concluded. Bonner stood, gathering his men with a glance. Been educational. Folks, maybe we'll meet again under better circumstances. Jake, Elijah called as the outlaw turned to leave. Why'd you really turn on Morrison? Bonner paused, considering. Man hired me to do a job, then hung me out to dry when it got complicated. But more than that. He looked at Josephine. Been in this business 20 years. Robbed, killed, done things I ain't proud of. But I never forced a woman into marriage against her will. Man's got to have some standards. With that philosophical observation, he and his men vanished into the pre-dawn darkness, heading south for the Mexican border. Elijah doubted they'd stay gone. Men like Bonner always drifted back, but for now, they'd served their purpose. We did it, Josephine said, clutching the evidence. We actually did it. The easy part's done, Elijah corrected. Now we have to get this back to Trinidad, convince a judge to act on it, and hope Morrison doesn't have us killed first. Such an optimist. But she was smiling, flushed with success. Come on, partner, let's finish this. The ride back to Trinidad took 2 days of hard travel. They pushed the horses, aware that Morrison would have informants who'd report Bonner's capture. Speed was their only advantage now. They reached the town as evening fell. Going straight to Blackwood's hotel, the mining magnate received them in his office. Examining the evidence with growing satisfaction. This is perfect, he said. With this, I can have Morrison arrested within the hour. His entire network will crumble. And our arrangement, Josephine asked pointedly, stands as discussed. A business partnership without the marriage component. Your father won't be pleased, but given the circumstances, he shrugged. I'll smooth it over. Consider yourself a free woman, Miss Whitmore. The relief that washed over Josephine's face was almost painful to see. Elijah realized how heavily the threat of forced marriage had weighed on her, even as she'd faced down outlaws and dust storms. There's still the matter of Mr. Cole's payment, she said, both from my father and your additional offer. Of course. Blackwood produced a bank draft, plus a bonus for exceeding expectations. You're quite the team. We have our moments, Elijah said dryly. They left the office as Blackwood summoned his lawyers and lawmen. On the street, Josephine suddenly laughed, spinning in a circle like a child. I'm free, she said wonderingly. Actually free. Free to do what? Elijah asked, though his heart was already racing ahead to possibilities. She stopped spinning, facing him with sudden seriousness. Free to choose, free to stay or go, to be whoever I want to be. She stepped closer. Free to love who I want to love. Josephine, no more excuses. Elijah, no more obligations or duties or reasons why not. She took his hands. I choose you, if you'll have me. He looked at her, this extraordinary woman who'd walked through fire and emerged stronger, who'd faced down outlaws and power brokers with equal courage, who'd chosen him despite having every reason not to. You sure you know what you're choosing? Life with a worn-out cavalry scout won't be easy. Easy is overrated. She smiled. I prefer interesting. Might be dangerous. When has it not been? Your father will disown you. Let him. Her grip tightened on his hands. I found something worth more than his approval. Don't you see? The trail didn't just change me. It showed me who I really am, and who I am wants to be with you. He pulled her close then, kissing her there on the dusty street while respectable people tutted and stared. Let them. He'd spent too many years living by other people's rules, letting fear and duty dictate his choices. So what now? She asked when they finally broke apart. Now, he grinned. Now we decide where to go. Whole frontiers out there waiting. Actually, a familiar voice interrupted. The frontier might have to wait. They turned to find Judge Whitmore standing behind them, flanked by armed men. His face was thunderous, aging him years in the weeks since they'd left Independence. Father, Josephine's voice was steady. I suppose you received word. I received word that my daughter had been corrupted by her hired guide, that she'd abandoned her duty to chase outlaws through the mountains like some common— Choose your next words carefully, Elijah warned, hand drifting to his gun. Or what? You'll shoot me? The judge laughed bitterly. You've already done worse. You've destroyed everything I worked for. No, Father, I've chosen my own path. There's a difference. Is there? You think love will sustain you when the money runs out? When you're living in some frontier hovel, watching your children grow up wild and uneducated? I think love will sustain me better than a loveless marriage ever could. Josephine stepped forward. I'm sorry I couldn't be the daughter you wanted, but I can't be sorry for choosing happiness. The judge's face cycled through emotions. Anger, hurt, disappointment. Finally, he just looked old. I suppose Blackwood told you about Morrison. He did. Your Grand Alliance nearly got me killed. I didn't know. He stopped, shoulders sagging. No, that's a lie. I suspected Morrison might interfere, but thought the potential gain worth the risk. Your life weighed against political power. At least you're honest about it. Honesty seems to be the theme of the day. He studied them both. You truly choose this man? This life? I do. Then I suppose there's nothing more to say. He turned to go, then paused. Your mother would have liked him. I think she always said I valued the wrong things. Father, be happy. Josephine, it's more than I managed. He walked away, his men following. Josephine started after him, but Elijah caught her arm. Let him go. He needs time to adjust. Will he? Adjust? Maybe, maybe not, but that's his choice to make. She leaned against him, suddenly exhausted. It's really over, isn't it? All of it? The old life? Yes, but the new one's just beginning. Where do we go? What do we do? Whatever we want. He kissed the top of her head. That's the beauty of freedom. It's full of possibilities. As they walked toward the livery to collect their horses, Morrison's arrest was already causing commotion in the streets. The power structure of the territory would shift. New alliances would form. But that was tomorrow's concern. Tonight, they had each other and the open trail ahead. It was enough. More than enough. You know, Josephine said as they saddled up, I never thanked you. For what? For seeing me, not the judge's daughter or Blackwood's intended or any of the other roles I was supposed to play. Just me. That's the only you worth seeing. She smiled, swinging into the saddle with easy grace. So, Mr. Cole, where shall we go first? He mounted Scout, considering. West, California maybe. Hear there's opportunities there for folks willing to work. Together. Can't imagine it any other way. They rode out of Trinidad as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Behind them lay the complications of civilization, the weight of other people's expectations. Ahead stretched the vast frontier, challenging and beautiful and full of promise. The trail had taken everything they thought they were and transformed it into something stronger, truer. Now it offered them a future limited only by their courage to pursue it. As the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, Elijah reached over and took Josephine's hand. She squeezed back, and they rode on in comfortable silence. Two souls who'd found each other against all odds. The world was wide, and they had time to explore it all. The arrest of Samuel Morrison sent shockwaves through Colorado territory. Within hours of Blackwood presenting the evidence to federal marshals, Morrison's empire began to crumble, but powerful men rarely fell without fighting back. Elijah woke in their hotel room to the sound of splintering wood. Years of combat had honed his instincts. He rolled from the bed, pulling Josephine with him, just as bullets tore through the space where they'd been lying. "Stay down!" He grabbed his revolver from the nightstand, returning fire through the shattered door. Two men burst in, guns blazing. Elijah dropped the first with a shot to the chest. The second dove for cover behind an overturned table. In the chaos, Josephine crawled to her travel bag, retrieving her own weapon. "Morrison's men!" she shouted over the gunfire. "Most likely." Elijah counted his remaining shots. 3. Not enough if more were coming. The gunman behind the table made a break for better position. Josephine's shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Elijah finished him with grim efficiency. Shouts from the hallway announced more trouble. Elijah quickly checked the downed attackers, grabbing their weapons and ammunition. "Window," he said tersely. "Now." They were on the second floor, but a balcony ran along the building's face. Josephine didn't hesitate. Hiking up her nightgown and climbing out, Elijah followed. Just as more gunmen flooded the room, they ran along the balcony, barefoot and half-dressed, as shots splintered wood around them. At the corner, Elijah boosted Josephine to the roof, then hauled himself up after her. "The livery," he said. "We need horses." They scrambled across connected rooftops, using the pre-dawn darkness as cover. Behind them, Morrison's men shouted coordinates, trying to cut off their escape. The town was waking to the sound of gunfire, but Elijah knew better than to expect help. Morrison owned too many people here. They dropped into an alley behind the general store, Elijah going first to break Josephine's fall. His shoulder protested, an old wound complaining, but he ignored it. "You're hurt," she said, noticing blood on his shirt. "Just a graze. Keep moving." They reached the livery as the first rays of dawn painted the mountains pink. The stable boy took one look at their weapons and disheveled state and wisely disappeared. Elijah quickly saddled Scout and Josephine's mare while she stood watch. "Riders coming," she warned. 6, maybe 7. Almost ready. He cinched the last strap. "Mount up." They burst from the livery at full gallop, scattering Morrison's men like 9 pins. Shots rang out, but hitting a moving target from horseback was harder than dime novels suggested. They thundered through Trinidad's waking streets, taking corners at dangerous speeds. At the edge of town, Blackwood's men had formed a defensive line. The mining magnate himself sat a black stallion, looking incongruous in his businessman's suit. "Thought you might need assistance," he called as they reined in. "Morrison's not taking his arrest well. We noticed," Elijah said dryly. "How many men does he have in town?" "Enough to be troublesome. I've wired for federal troops, but they won't arrive until tomorrow." Blackwood studied them. "You can't go back to the hotel. Morrison's men will be watching. We weren't planning to stay anyway." Josephine said, "Our business here is finished." "Is it?" Blackwood's expression was calculating. "I could use people like you. Good pay, steady work. The territory's changing. Needs folks who can handle both a gun and a negotiation." "Appreciate the offer," Elijah said. "But we've got other plans." "Pity. You'd have made interesting allies." Blackwood tipped his hat. "There's a judge in my pocket who can marry you before you leave. If you're interested, consider it a parting gift." Josephine looked at Elijah. "What do you think?" "I think we've got more pressing concerns than wedding plans." She laughed despite the circumstances. "Practical as always. I'll take that as a maybe." Blackwood gestured to his men. "Escort them to the territorial border. Make sure Morrison's dogs don't follow." They rode out with a dozen armed guards, leaving Trinidad and its complications behind. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill, despite the violent awakening. Elijah felt oddly at peace. The last ties to their old lives had been severed. They were truly free now. "You saved my life back there," Josephine said once they were clear of town. "Again, you saved mine right back. That's what partners do." "Partners," she smiled. "I like the sound of that." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Their escort spread out in a protective formation. The mountains gave way to high desert, painted in shades of red and gold. It was harsh country, but beautiful in its severity. At midday, they stopped to water the horses at a spring. Blackwood's men kept watch while Elijah and Josephine sat in the shade of a cottonwood. "No regrets?" he asked, watching her clean her revolver with practiced ease. "About Morrison? About my father? About any of it?" She shook her head. "My only regret is Mary. She deserved better. She did, but she also chose to come, knowing the risks. We all make our choices, and live with the consequences." She reassembled the weapon efficiently. "Speaking of consequences, we should probably discuss the future." "What about it?" "Well, we're currently unemployed fugitives with a powerful enemy who wants us dead. Some might consider that problematic." Elijah laughed. "When you put it that way, it does sound challenging. I'm serious. Morrison has reached beyond Colorado. He'll send men after us. Let him. We've dealt with his type before. That was when we had Blackwood's resources. Now it's just us. Just us is enough." He took her hand. "But if you're having second thoughts, never." Her grip was firm. "I just want to be realistic about what we're facing." "Then realistically, we need to disappear for a while. New names, new place. Let the dust settle. Morrison's got bigger problems than us right now, but he'll want revenge eventually." "Where do we go?" "West, like we planned. California's big enough to lose ourselves in. Gold fields are still producing. Ranching's growing. Plenty of opportunities for folks willing to work. From Boston society to California ranch hand." She smiled wryly. "Mother would be mortified. Your mother's not here." "No, she's not." The smile faded. "She died when I was 12. Consumption. Father changed after that, became harder, more focused on control. I think he was afraid of losing me too. Fear makes people do foolish things, like trying to control everything and everyone around them." She leaned against his shoulder. "I won't live that way. Whatever comes, we face it as equals." Agreed. By late afternoon, they'd reached the territorial border. Blackwood's men prepared to turn back, their duty done. The leader, a grizzled veteran named Haskins, pulled Elijah aside. "Word of advice, stay off the main trails for a few weeks. Morrison's reach is long, but even he can't watch every path through the mountains. Appreciate the warning. Also this." Haskins handed over a leather pouch. "Mister, Blackwood said you'd earned a bonus. Enough to start fresh, wherever you end up." Elijah hefted the pouch, feeling the weight of gold coins. "Tell Blackwood we're grateful. Tell him yourself, if you ever come back this way." Haskins grinned. "Though I'd wait a few years. Memories are long in these parts." The escort departed, leaving Elijah and Josephine alone on the trail for the first time since their flight from Trinidad. The sun was westering, painting long shadows across the desert floor. "We should find shelter for the night," Elijah said. "There's a box canyon few miles ahead. Good water, defensible position. Always thinking tactically. Hard habit to break." They made camp as stars emerged in the darkening sky. The familiar routine of unsaddling horses and gathering firewood felt almost nostalgic after the morning's violence, working together with easy efficiency. They soon had a comfortable camp established. "You know what I miss?" Josephine said as they sat by the fire sharing dried beef and biscuit. "Hot baths, feather beds, decent food. My books." She smiled at his surprise. "I had quite a collection back in Boston. Poetry, philosophy, novels. Father thought most of it frivolous, but I loved losing myself in other worlds. We'll get you new books. California has bookstores. It's not the same. Those books were friends, companions through lonely years. She poked at the fire. Silly to mourn objects, I suppose. Not silly at all. We all leave pieces of ourselves behind. What did you leave? Elijah considered. Letters mostly. From Sarah. From army friends who didn't make it home. Kept them in an old ammunition box. Read them when the ghosts got too loud. Do you still hear them? The ghosts? Sometimes. Less than before. He looked at her across the fire. You quiet them. Elijah Cole, that might be the most romantic thing you've said. Don't get used to it. I'm out of practice with pretty words. I don't need pretty words. She moved around the fire to sit beside him. I need truth, honesty, someone who sees me as I am, not as they wish I was. That I can do. They sat quietly for a while, watching the fire burn down. The desert night was alive with small sounds. Wind through stone, distant coyotes, the rustle of nocturnal hunters. It was a symphony of survival, harsh but honest. I've been thinking about Blackwood's offer. Josephine said eventually, the job or the wedding. The wedding. She turned to look at him. Would it matter to you, being formally married? Would it matter to you? I asked first. Elijah pulled her closer. I stopped believing in formal anything the day I walked away from the army. Pieces of paper don't make promises real. Actions do. That's not an answer. Then yes, it would matter. Not because I need society's blessing, but because I want the world to know you're mine and I'm yours. No ambiguity, no questions, just truth. Now who's being romantic? Must be your influence. She laughed. The sound, bright in the darkness. Then we're agreed. When we reach California, we find a preacher, or a justice of the peace, or a ship captain. Hell, I'd settle for a traveling medicine man if he can make it legal. Such high standards. Woman, I'd marry you right here under these stars if I thought it would stick. She kissed him then, long and sweet. When they parted, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I'm happy. Elijah. Truly, bewilderingly happy. I didn't know it could feel like this. Like what? Like coming home. She traced his jaw with gentle fingers. All those years in Boston, playing the dutiful daughter. I felt like a stranger in my own life. But here, with you, covered in trail dust and running from gunmen, I'm exactly where I belong. You sure? It's not too late to... She silenced him with another kiss. If you suggest one more time that I'd be better off without you, I'll shoot you myself. Yes, ma'am. They made their bed under the open sky, wrapped in each other and shared blankets. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and eternal, witness to countless human dramas. In the grand scheme, they were insignificant. Two people choosing each other against reasonable odds. But in the small scheme, the human scheme, it was everything. Tell me about California, Josephine said sleepily. What will we do there? Whatever we want. Ranch, maybe. Run cattle or horses. Or try our hand at business in San Francisco. Gold may be played out, but the city's still growing. A house with windows facing west. Garden in the back. Room for books. Big porch for watching sunsets. Children eventually. If we're lucky. Elijah? Thank you for following me into this love I couldn't escape. He tightened his arms around her. Other way around. You followed me. Maybe we followed each other. Maybe we did. She fell asleep soon after, her breathing deep and even. But Elijah stayed awake longer, keeping watch out of habit and inclination. Somewhere in the darkness, dangers still lurked. Morrison's men, Apache war parties, the 1,000 natural threats of the frontier. But for now, in this moment, they were safe, together, free. The future stretched ahead like an unmapped trail, full of promise and peril in equal measure. They'd face it as they'd faced everything else, together, honest, unafraid, partners in truth. It was more than most people got, and everything they needed. As the fire died to embers and the desert cold crept in, Elijah finally allowed himself to drift toward sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new chances to prove their commitment. But tonight, under the vast western sky, they were exactly where they belonged. The trail had ended. The journey was just beginning. The New Mexico territory stretched before them like a painted canvas, all reds and ochres beneath an endless blue dome. They'd been riding for 3 days since leaving Colorado, keeping to little-used trails and camping in hidden arroyos. The constant vigilance was wearing, but necessary. Twice they'd spotted dust clouds that might have been pursuit. On the 4th morning, Elijah woke to find Josephine already up, standing at the edge of their camp with her rifle, scanning the horizon. "Trouble?" he asked, reaching for his own weapon. "Maybe riders to the east, moving parallel to us since dawn." He joined her, studying the distant figures. 4 men, too far to identify but moving with purpose. Could be anyone. Traders, settlers, bandits. Or Morrison's men. Or Morrison's men. He agreed. "We'll alter course. Head into the mountains. Harder trailing, but better cover." They broke camp quickly, a routine now practiced to efficiency. As they rode into increasingly rough country, Elijah noticed Josephine's pallor, the way she gripped her saddle horn. "You all right?" "Fine, just tired." But as she said it, she swayed slightly. He reached out to steady her. "When's the last time you ate a full meal?" "Yesterday. No, day before." She managed a weak smile. "Haven't had much appetite. We're stopping." "Elijah, those riders can wait. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." He found a defensible spot near a clear stream, with good sight lines and overhead cover from ancient cottonwoods. While Josephine rested in the shade, he set snares for rabbits and gathered edible plants Sarah had taught him to recognize years ago. "You're hovering," Josephine said as he brought her water. "I'm concerned. You've been pushing too hard." "We both have." She accepted the water gratefully. "I just need rest, and maybe something besides hardtack and jerky." Working on it. By evening, he'd managed a decent meal, rabbit stew with wild onions and herbs, even some berries he'd found growing near the stream. Josephine ate slowly but steadily, color returning to her cheeks. "You'd make someone a good wife," she teased as he cleaned the cookware. "Already taken, I'm afraid." "Not officially. Details." He sat beside her as darkness fell. "Feeling better?" "Much. Thank you for insisting we stop. Partners, remember, your well-being is my concern." She leaned against him. "I've been thinking about what that Apache warrior said, about the land claiming me." "What about it?" "He was right. I can feel it sometimes, like the desert is getting into my bones. The silence, the space, the honesty of it all." She paused. "Does that sound foolish?" "Not to me. Land does that to some people. Gets in your blood until you can't imagine being anywhere else." "Is that how you feel?" "Have for years. The war ended, and I tried going back east. Lasted 3 months before I was half crazy from walls and crowds and people living on top of each other. Out here, a man can breathe. A woman, too," she added softly. "A woman, too." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the night sounds. Then Josephine stiffened. "The fire. Should we?" "Already banked it. Just coals now. No smoke to speak of." He'd been taking precautions automatically. "But you're right to think of it. You're learning. I had a good teacher." The next morning brought a decision point. The riders were still there, hanging back but definitely following. The mountains offered escape but would slow them down. The open desert meant speed, but exposure. "Your call," Elijah said, though he had his own opinion. Josephine studied their options with narrowed eyes. "Desert. If they're going to catch us, I'd rather see them coming." "My thought exactly." They rode hard across the flats. Their shadows shortened to nothing beneath the noon sun. The followers matched their pace but didn't close the distance. It was almost worse than an attack. The constant pressure, the waiting. That evening, they sheltered in a cluster of wind-carved rocks, Elijah was checking their back trail when he heard Josephine cry out. He ran back to find her facing a Mexican trader, his hands raised peacefully. "No harm, Señora," the man said quickly. "I am Pedro Vasquez, a merchant. I saw your fire and hope to share your camp." Elijah kept his gun ready but didn't point it directly at the man. "You alone? Sai traveling to Santa Fe with medicines and cloth." He gestured to a heavily laden mule. "The roads, they are dangerous for a single traveler. They're dangerous for everyone." Josephine said, "You've seen no one else?" "Only the 4 men who follow you. They stopped at my camp yesterday, asking questions." Pedro's weathered face creased with concern. "They seek a man and woman, offering much gold for information." "And what did you tell them?" "That I had seen no one. I do not like their eyes, you understand? Cold, like snakes." Elijah exchanged glances with Josephine. "We can share the camp, but we keep watches." "Of course. And perhaps a trade? I have newspapers from Santa Fe, only a week old. News of the world, for those who hunger for it." Josephine's eyes lit up. "Newspapers?" "Sit, and a book or two. My wife, she insists I carry them. Says it civilizes the wilderness." They made a comfortable camp, and Pedro proved an amiable companion. He shared his food, spiced beans and cornbread that tasted like a feast after days of trail rations, and regaled them with gossip from Santa Fe. "There is much talk of the Morrison scandal," he said, producing a crumpled newspaper. "The man's empire crumbles like old adobe. Many arrests, much shouting in the courts." Josephine seized the paper eagerly. Reading by firelight. "It's true. Morrison's been indicted on multiple charges: conspiracy, attempted murder, bribery." She looked up. "We're mentioned. The mysterious disappearance of Judge Whitmore's daughter and her escort remains unexplained." "Mysterious," Elijah repeated dryly. "We prefer it that way." "Your father offers a reward for information." Pedro noted carefully. $5,000 for our safe return. The notice does not specify. Josephine's face hardened. "Of course it doesn't." She returned to the paper, but Elijah saw the hurt she tried to hide later, as Pedro snored peacefully and Elijah kept watch. Josephine joined him at the edge of camp. "Can't sleep?" "Too much thinking." She settled beside him. "Is it wrong to wish he cared? Even a little?" "He cares, just can't separate it from his need to control." "You're defending him, understanding him. There's a difference." Elijah scanned the darkness automatically. "Man loses his wife, raises a daughter alone. Fear of losing her too gets twisted up with love until he can't tell them apart." "When did you become so wise about fathers and daughters?" "When I fell in love with one." She leaned into him. "I want to hate him. It would be easier." "Hate's never easier. Trust someone who carried it for years. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." "Then what do I do with all this anger?" "Let it go. Not for him, for you, for us. Can't build a future on a foundation of rage." She was quiet for a long time. "You're right, as usual. I have my moments, more than moments." She kissed his cheek. "I'll take the next watch. You need rest too." He started to protest, then saw the determination in her eyes. 2 hours, then wake me. 3. Josephine. 3. Or I let you sleep till dawn. You're a hard woman to argue with. Learning from the best." He left her to her watch, trusting her vigilance. It was a small thing, but significant. The complete faith that she could protect them as well as he could. Morning brought a proposal from Pedro. "I could travel with you to Santa Fe. There is safety in numbers." "No." Elijah looked at Josephine, who nodded slightly. "We'd welcome the company." They set out together, the trader's cheerful chatter a pleasant change from days of tense silence. But the followers were still there, hanging back like patient wolves. "Tonight, we solved this," Josephine said quietly. "What do you have in mind?" "Pedro mentioned a box canyon ahead, Cañón de los Muertos. One way in, one way out. Canyon of the Dead, charming name. If they follow us in, we confront them. If they don't, we know they're just paralleling our route, not actively hunting. And if they do follow," her smile was sharp, "then we end this." Elijah considered the plan. Risky, but better than days more of cat and mouse. "All right, but we do it smart. Scout the canyon first, set up positions." They reached the canyon at sunset. Pedro, no fool, chose to camp at the mouth. "I will keep good watch," he promised. "And if you do not return, I will tell your story in Santa Fe." "Comforting," Elijah said dryly. The canyon was a slash in the earth, narrow and winding. They found good positions among the rocks, with clear fields of fire and cover. Then they built a visible fire and waited. 2 hours after full dark, they came. 4 men, moving carefully but confidently. They'd left their horses at the canyon mouth, approaching on foot. Smart, but not smart enough. "That's far enough," Elijah called out. The men froze, hands moving toward weapons. "I wouldn't," Josephine added from her position. "We have you covered." "Easy now," the lead man said. "No need for violence. We're just looking for some folks, man and woman, traveling together." "And if you found them?" "Bring them back to Colorado? There's people want to talk to them." "Morrison's people?" The man hesitated. "Does it matter? Money's money." "It matters," Elijah said. "Because Morrison's finished. No more paydays from that source." "You're lying. Check the newspapers in Santa Fe. Hell, check with any marshal. Morrison's in federal custody. His assets frozen. You're chasing ghosts for promises that won't be kept." The men muttered among themselves. "Finally," the leader spoke again. "Maybe so, but Judge Whitmore's money is still good." "The judge wants us dead?" Josephine called out, unable to hide the pain in her voice. "Dead or alive makes no difference to the bounty." Something cold settled in Elijah's chest. "You boys made a long ride for nothing. Turn around. Go home. Tell whoever's paying you that the trail went cold. Can't do that. Got a reputation to maintain." "So do we." Elijah's voice hardened. "The kind that comes from leaving dead men in canyons. Your choice." The standoff stretched taut. 4 men in the open against 2 in good cover. The math wasn't complicated. Finally, the leader raised his hands. "All right, trail went cold. We'll be going." They backed away slowly, not turning until they reached the canyon mouth. Elijah and Josephine held position until they heard horses leaving, then carefully made their way back to Pedro's camp. "It is done?" the trader asked. "For now." Elijah kept watching the darkness. "But there'll be others. Then perhaps you need new names, new faces." Pedro smiled. "I know people in Santa Fe. Papers can be arranged. History's created. You would not be the first to find new lives in the territory." Josephine looked at Elijah. "What do you think?" "I think Pedro's a wise man." 3 days later, they rode into Santa Fe as Thomas and Margaret Harper, a couple from Kansas seeking opportunities in the territories. Pedro's contacts proved efficient. Within a week, they had documentation supporting their new identities. "It feels strange," Josephine said, examining her new papers. "Like we're erasing ourselves." Not erasing, starting fresh." Elijah, now Thomas, took her hand. Josephine Whitmore was a Boston society girl forced into an unwanted marriage. Margaret Harper is a free woman who chose her own path. And Elijah Cole was a man haunted by war and loss. Thomas Harper has a wife he loves and a future to build. She smiled. "When you put it that way, it sounds like a fair trade." They were married by a circuit judge on a crisp autumn morning, with Pedro and his wife as witnesses. It wasn't the society wedding Josephine had been raised to expect. No white dress, no orchestra, no hundreds of guests. Just simple vows exchanged in a small chapel, followed by a modest celebration at Pedro's home. "Any regrets?" Elijah asked as they danced to guitar music in the courtyard. "Only one," she said. "I wish Mary could have been here. She would have been happy for us." "She would have. And maybe Father will forgive me someday." "Maybe, but that's his journey to make." She nodded, then smiled. "No more sadness today. We're married." We're free, and we're together. That's worth celebrating. They left Santa Fe 2 days later, heading west toward California with a wagon train of other hopeful settlers. Just another couple seeking their fortune in the Golden State, unremarkable except to each other. As they made camp that first night on the trail, Josephine, Margaret now, looked back toward the mountains hiding Colorado. "No second thoughts?" Elijah asked. "None." She turned to him with clear eyes. "That life is done. This one is just beginning." He pulled her close as the stars emerged overhead. Somewhere behind them, their old names and lives faded like smoke. Ahead lay California and all its promises. They'd been hired for an escort job that became a flight that became a love story that became a new life. The trail had taken everything they were and transformed it into everything they could be. Now, as Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Harper, they would write the next chapter themselves. 5 years later. Northern California. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the valley as Margaret Harper stood on the porch of their ranch house, one hand resting on her swollen belly. The view never failed to move her. Rolling hills dotted with oak trees, their cattle grazing peacefully in the meadows below. Mountains rising blue and distant on the horizon. "You shouldn't be on your feet so much," Thomas said, emerging with 2 cups of coffee. "The doctor said movement is good for me. And the baby." She accepted the coffee gratefully. "Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on things while you're breaking those new horses. Miguel can handle it. Miguel is teaching his son to rope. Family comes first." She smiled at the irony of her words. "We learned that the hard way, didn't we?" He wrapped his arms around her from behind, careful of her belly. "We learned a lot of things the hard way." Their ranch wasn't large by California standards, just 500 acres. But it was theirs, bought with the gold from Blackwood and built up through 5 years of hard work. They ran cattle, bred horses, and had recently added fruit orchards. It was a good life, an honest life, far removed from the violence that had brought them together. "Rider coming," Thomas noted, his hand moving automatically toward the rifle by the door. Old habits died hard. Margaret squinted at the distant figure. "It's just Doc Henshaw, probably checking on the Andersons' new baby." But as the rider drew closer, she realized it wasn't the doctor. The man sat his horse like a soldier, back straight despite obvious weariness. Something about him seemed familiar. "Get inside," Thomas said quietly. No. She'd recognized him now, though age and weather had carved new lines in his face. "It's all right." Judge Whitmore, for it was unmistakably him, reined in at their gate. He looked older, grayer, somehow diminished from the imposing figure who'd hired Elijah Cole 5 years ago. "Josephine," he said simply. "That name belongs to another life." She replied, "I'm Margaret Harper now. I know. It took me 3 years to find you, another 2 to work up the courage to come." He looked at Thomas. "Mr. Cole. Thomas Harper. And you're trespassing." "I suppose I am." The judge dismounted slowly, like his bones hurt. "I won't stay long. I needed to see you, to say things that should have been said years ago." Margaret felt Thomas tense beside her, ready to send her father away. She touched his arm gently. Let him speak. They didn't invite him inside. Some wounds ran too deep for that courtesy. But they sat on the porch, an awkward trinity bound by history and pain. "Your mother would have loved this place," Judge Whitmore said, looking out at the valley. "She always wanted to travel west, see the frontier. I promised we would, after I'd made enough money, established enough influence." His laugh was bitter. "Always one more deal, one more alliance." Then she died, and all those promises turned to ash. "Father, please let me finish. I've rehearsed this speech 1,000 times. He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I told myself I was protecting you, controlling you, building you a safe, prosperous future. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you and started seeing only what I needed you to be." Margaret said nothing, but tears tracked down her cheeks. When news came that you disappeared, I was furious. How dare you defy me? How dare you choose your own path? He looked at Thomas. I wanted you dead, Mr. Cole. Hired men to find you, bring you back. Told myself it was justice. We know, Thomas said flatly. We met some of them. Yes, I imagine you did. The judge aged another year in that moment. It took Morrison's arrest, his trial, learning how close I'd come to losing you forever. I started questioning everything. What kind of father puts his daughter's life at risk for political gain? What kind of man values power over love? The kind who's forgotten what matters. Margaret said softly. Yes, exactly that. He reached into his coat, producing a thick envelope. I've spent the last 2 years undoing the damage I caused. Morrison's in prison. His network is broken. The territories are finding their own balance without our manipulation. And this is for you. Margaret took the envelope warily. Inside were legal documents, bank drafts, and a letter in her father's careful script. I've liquidated most of my holdings, he explained. What's there is yours, your inheritance, freed from conditions or obligations. The letter, well, that's private, for when I'm gone. You're not dying, are you? Despite everything, concern colored her voice. Not yet. But I'm old and tired, and very much alone. He stood, settling his hat. I don't expect forgiveness. Hell, I don't deserve it, but I needed you to know that I understand now. What I did, what I lost, what you gained by having the courage I never did. He moved toward his horse, then paused. The child you're carrying, will you tell them about their grandfather? Margaret looked at Thomas, who nodded slightly. We'll tell them the truth, all of it, the good and the bad. That's fair, more than fair. He mounted with difficulty. Be happy, Josephine, both of you. It's what your mother would have wanted, what I should have wanted. He rode away without looking back, a broken man who'd learned wisdom too late. Margaret stood watching until he disappeared over the hill, one hand pressed to her belly where new life stirred. You all right? Thomas asked. I think so. It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I need to sit down. The baby's doing somersaults. He helped her to the rocking chair they'd placed specifically for her comfort. What does the letter say? She broke the seal, reading silently. After a moment, she laughed, a watery sound caught between joy and sorrow. He's leaving everything to our children, says he hopes they inherit their mother's courage and their father's integrity, and... She had to stop, overcome by emotion. And he hopes they never have to choose between love and duty, because he's seen what choosing wrong can cost. Thomas knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. He's trying. 5 years too late. Better late than never. She managed a smile. When did you become the forgiving one? When I realized holding on to anger was like carrying stones. Eventually. You've got to put them down or they'll crush you. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Miguel Vasquez, Pedro's nephew who'd become their foreman, brought unexpected news. There's talk in town, he said. A new preacher has arrived. They say he performs weddings for anyone, no questions asked. Even Chinese, Mexicans, Indians. Progressive for these parts. Thomas noted, Sit. But here's the interesting part. He says he was a chaplain in the war, traveled all through the territories afterward. Says he once witnessed a wedding in Colorado that changed his views on who deserves happiness. Margaret and Thomas exchanged glances. The chaplain from Fort Larned. Could be coincidence. Thomas said, Could be. But Margaret smiled. I think I'd like to meet this preacher. Thank him for his inclusive views. 2 days later, they made the trip to town. The preacher, Reverend Samuel Hartley, was indeed the same man who'd testified on their behalf years ago. His hair was white now, his face more lined, but his eyes were kind as ever. Mr. and Mrs. Harper. He greeted them with a knowing smile. How providential. I have often wondered what became of you. We've done well, Margaret said, thanks in part to your courage in speaking out. Courage? No, my dear. Just truth. Love is love, whether it blooms in a Boston parlor or on a dusty trail. He admired her obvious pregnancy. I see your love has borne fruit. Due next month, Thomas said proudly. A blessing. Children have a way of healing old wounds. The Reverend's expression grew thoughtful. I don't suppose you'd consider having the child baptized when the time comes? I promise, no questions about your past. Margaret looked at Thomas. They'd left organized religion behind with their old names, but something about this man's genuine faith appealed. We'll think about it, she said. A month later, as autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and rust, Margaret's labor began. Thomas, who'd faced down outlaws and dust storms without flinching, was nearly paralyzed with fear. Stop pacing, she told him between contractions. You're making me nervous. I can't help it. I should do something. You've done enough, she said, then gasped as another wave hit. Oh, this one means business. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen, took charge with calm efficiency. Baby's coming fast. Good position. You're doing fine. Mrs. Harper. Thomas held Margaret's hand through the endless hours, whispering encouragement, wiping her brow, being the rock she needed. When their daughter finally arrived, pink and perfect and loud, he wept openly. She's beautiful, he said, touching the baby's tiny fist with one trembling finger. Just like her mother. She has your stubborn chin, Margaret countered, exhausted but radiant. What shall we call her? They'd discussed names for months but hadn't settled. Now, looking at their daughter, the choice seemed obvious. Sarah, Thomas said softly. Sarah Mary Harper, for the women who brought us together. In their own ways. Margaret nodded, tears flowing freely. Sarah Mary, our new beginning. As she nursed their daughter for the first time, Thomas sat beside them, one arm around his wife, his other hand resting gently on the baby's head. Outside, the sun set over their valley, painting the sky in brilliant shades of rose and gold. No regrets? Margaret asked, echoing his old question. None. You? How could I regret the path that brought me here? To you, to her. She looked down at Sarah, who'd fallen asleep with milk-drunk contentment. We've come so far from that dusty trail in Kansas. Miles and years, he agreed. But I'd travel every one again to end up here. Even the hard parts, the fear, the violence, the running. Especially those. They made us who we are. He kissed her temple, made us strong enough for this life we built. A week later, Reverend Hartley came to baptize Sarah Mary Harper. The small church was packed with their neighbors, ranchers, farmers, townspeople who'd become friends. Miguel stood as godfather, his wife Rosa as godmother. As the Reverend sprinkled water on Sarah's head, she protested loudly. He spoke words that seemed meant for more than just the baptism. This child enters the world blessed by love that overcame every obstacle, protected by parents who chose courage over convention. May she grow strong in the freedom they won for her. After the ceremony, as friends and neighbors gathered at the ranch for celebration, Margaret found a quiet moment on the porch, the same porch where she'd stood that morning, where her father had made his peace, where she'd watched countless sunsets with Thomas. Penny for your thoughts. Thomas joined her, Sarah sleeping in his arms. Just thinking how strange life is. If Father hadn't hired you, if we hadn't faced those dangers together, we'd never have found each other. Or ourselves. She touched Sarah's soft cheek. She'll never know that struggle. She'll grow up free, able to choose her own path from the beginning. That's the point, isn't it? We went through hell so she won't have to. Margaret smiled. Though knowing your daughter, she'll find her own adventures. God help us. They laughed together, comfortable and easy. Inside, their guests celebrated. Outside, their land stretched peaceful under the stars. And in Thomas's arms, their daughter slept safely, dreaming whatever dreams babies dream. The escort job was long finished. The flight from danger had ended. The love story had become a life story, rich with the ordinary miracles of each new day. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate across the valley. The sound no longer meant danger, just the wild heart of the land they'd claimed, as it had claimed them. "Let's go inside," Margaret said. "Our guests are waiting." In a moment, Thomas pulled her close with his free arm. Their daughter nestled between them. "Just want to remember this. All of it." So they stood together in the gathering darkness, a family forged by trial and held by love. Proof that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the sweetest destinations. The trail that had begun with a simple job, escort the judge's daughter to her wedding, had led them here, to this moment, to this life they'd chosen and built together. It was, Thomas thought, one hell of a good ride, and it was far from over. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Elijah and Josephine's journey from that dusty trail in Missouri to their happy ending in California. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier tales, and let me know what you thought of this story. Did you see that ending coming? What was your favorite part? Your comments and support mean the world to me. Until next time, partners.